Good morning. How are you doing today? Wonderful? Excited? About what? Thank you. Well, so exactly. Well, it's a both-way win-win. So I'm Kamlesh Ravlani. Come from Phoenix, bright, sunny Phoenix, Arizona, in USA, and I'm going to talk about: is your organization ready to scale agile? How many of you are practitioners, particularly in the scaled domain? Work with large programs, multiple teams, or use some type of framework? Wonderful. Keep your hands up. Yeah. Wonderful. How many of you are certified? Please keep your hands up if you are certified in some type of scale framework. Some type of. Okay, wonderful. And how about rest of you guys who are totally new to scaling? Okay, wonderful. And how many of you who are new to scaling are in some type of leadership, managerial positions? Okay, wonderful. So the idea is that we're going to discuss how you evaluate whether your organization is ready to scale or not, or do you really need it? So question one is, why scale? What is the need to scale within your division, group, organization, or a business unit, wherever you are? What's the need to scale? Is it because everybody else is doing it? Let's do it. Is it a latest buzzword? CEO, CIO heard somewhere at the golf with their peers, colleagues, and they say, well, they are doing it, let's do it too. So how would we take a minute, write down what is the need within your context? If you work with a company, great, you have very specific context. If you are a consultant, coach, or kind of a trainer, you work with multiple organizations, they may be asking you to bring your expertise or knowledge about scaling. So take a minute, write down what's the need, what's your vision about it, please. Yeah, write down on a paper, that's okay. You don't need sticky for this. And if I could request you, both of you, to please join one of the team, that would be great. Does anyone here not know what do I mean by scaling agile? Or have no idea about it?
I was wondering if we have a common definition.
Okay, wonderful. Sure. Now, scaling might mean different for different people, different organizations, based on their need and context. But if you are looking at large programs which need more hands to work on, more people to work on, than a standard Scrum team that we identify, maximum 9 people. If your team has like 25 or maybe 50 or maybe 500, then you need some way to identify how this is going to work, because your team cannot be ideally more than 9 people. Yeah? Or if you have large program that needs to be delivered within certain time frame, again, you would need multiple modules being developed at the same time. I was in an environment where we had an existing legacy product which had to be revamped and redesigned, rewrote, and this was used in educational field. And millions of students, school districts were using this program to administer some exams for the students, which means that all of the functionality which the current product has, the new product must have, or ideally should have. And most likely, or preferably, it should have some additional features as well, because we are saying, well, we are launching new products, so it should have some new features as well. Now, there's a timeline that this product must be released within that, so that it can meet the timeline when the school districts actually make their purchasing decisions, buying decisions about these programs. That means that we had to use more number of team members on the team, identify different modules which could be developed simultaneously. Is it a fair, good starting point? Thank you. So I believe by now you have some idea about why your organization wants to scale. It's important to have a clear vision, specific goals or benefits that you're looking for, and whether those benefits will be met by you adopting some type of scaling framework. Right? And context is king within your organization. Each organization have different opportunities, strengths, and constraints in how these organizations work. So what do we do with the context? Who has the context? Who has the context? People working on in the organization, on teams. And what do you do with that? What do you do with the context that you have? Set the context. Well, so you initiate or you facilitate interaction among these people for them to discuss the context, because those people know the context, and for them to bring up the context, you as a leader need to facilitate that conversation for them to bring those things up and discuss that based on these things, how we go about it. So the goal for me here today is to discuss some of the scaling factors that I have found very useful for us to consider. Please hear me correctly, that these are the factors that I have found useful for me to have conversation within the teams. This is not a checklist kind of a thing, but these are not the only factors. You might have different factors that you may find more beneficial or useful or more contextual to your need. Okay? But I fairly find that these have consistently helped me initiate good conversations with the teams. Organizational culture. How is organization doing what they are doing? How are things done? How are decisions being made? Whether through bright ideas win, or people with the loudest, who can shout the loudest, they get the funding or they get their ideas accepted. How's the hiring going on? All these decisions that teams or organizations make are driven by the culture. So how is the culture within this organization? Sorry. And the organizational structure. Yesterday you heard some conversations about organizations that are more of hierarchical command and control of a triangular shape versus organizations which are more newer, lean, they are more flatter. There are more empowerment within the teams. There are less hierarchies that people have for their reporting. And that really empowers people at the front take the ownership, be self-organized. Also, it helps, facilitates the information flow, rapid information flow from the front to the top. So if the person who's developing your program and the person who's reporting the final results to the Wall Street or the Dalal Street here, how many lines of organizational barriers are there between these people? Organizational structures. Now the more the barriers, more the silos you will see. More the silos you see, more the competition will you see among these silos. Where, I'll give you an example. I was with a large financial organization, and the team that was developing, maintaining, and helping develop this software programs, applications, were reporting to directors. Directors were reporting to VPs. And these VPs were reporting to the presidents in one technical organization. And there were business teams, product owners, who were reporting to their product directors, product VPs, and their presidents. Now, both these leaders have their own priorities. They have their own needs. Now, though they are both working together, their teams are working together, at the end of the day, who wants the credit when the product gets deployed? Who? Both, right? Yes. What they did is, after they identified that in a newer way of working, we would have to break down these organizational silos for people to collaborate. And people to collaborate, share information, not withhold that, they would have to eventually report to one leader. They would have to have common shared understanding and common goals. So with the organizational structural changes, they've identified one president where both of these VPs would report. Now, the sooner it happened, the conversations changed. Now, from us and you, to it became, okay, what's our goal? What are we trying to accomplish? What percentage share we want to grow in the consumer sector, in the corporate sector? What is our business volume that's going to look like? And how are we going to accomplish it? Which product or initiative are we going to fund? So now these were common conversations. It helped it being from you and I, or we versus you, to being us in there. These structural changes changed the way teams were looking at the things, where there was a tension between, who's eventually going to get the credit, to now, okay, how are we going to meet that goal? Structural changes as well as cultural changes, I have found myself that they are interconnected. You can influence culture by changing your organization structure, and vice versa. Your organizational culture could also help you arrive at the right organization structure. How about we take 5 minutes on your tables and write down how the organizational culture and the structure impacts you? What are the factors within those that are important for you? Please discuss on your team. You have 5 minutes for that. You have 2 more minutes. Oh. For the culture, for the structure. Were you guys able to identify some factors? Yes, everyone? All the teams? Is any team that was not able to identify even one factor? All right, so those of you who just joined, please join a team and you can have the conversation among you. So they will also give you some context. Yes? Okay, let's move on. The third factor, all right, if all of us can have attention here, please. Thank you. So I'm sure all of us know this. When the facilitator raised the hand, we all stop doing what we are doing. We complete the sentence that if we are talking, and raise the hand. Yes? See, let's see if we can do that. Thank you. Great groups I have found achieving consistently all their hands up within 7 seconds. Let's see if we can break that record consistently. All right, so the next factor. We found that very important for scaling conversation is leadership agility. Are the leaders thinking lean? Do the people at top have that mindset already? Do they know the stuff themselves and practice it, what they are expecting their people to be doing? Does that reflect in their actions when they hire, when they make decisions? Right? When they let people do certain things or initiate some initiatives. Are the pilots in the cockpit all well trained? Or do you have untrained pilots in the cockpit who all of you in the organization are trusting? Very frequently, the leaders, clients that I talk to, leaders bring up this conversation that, oh yeah, we all understand Agile and we have been doing the daily scrums and our teams are great at these sprints, but we have X, Y, and Z problems. And the teams have a similar opinion. That, oh yeah, we all get this, but our leaders don't get this. Our leaders are still asking us to do those same things. They are still behaving in that same way. So how is leadership within your organization impacting the decision to scale? How big of the programs that your organization is carrying out, and how many people are supporting that organization? Do you have people micromanaging teams? Do you have each person being held or being directed by somebody else at the top? Or are people allowed to self-organize? Are the managers doing a job of helping people grow, helping people learn, rather than making decisions on their behalf? Next is a product ownership. In the organizations, frequently I find this, and I say this, that when I talk to organizations, leaders, they say, we have no PO, VPO, IPO, no PO. What I mean by that is when we talk to them and say, okay, who's your PO? Like, oh, we don't have a PO. I'm like, no, you must have a PO. If you're doing a Scrum, product owner is the first thing that you need. Oh yeah, we all do that. We all write the requirements and we all make the decisions. So from no PO, the conversation changes to VPO. I'm like, no, but somebody should be there who makes those decisions. Then the conversation changes. Oh yeah, that I do that. I am the one who makes those decisions. So from VPO, the conversation changes to IPO. And then the conversation happens that, well, do you have that product domain expertise? Do you talk to the customers? Oh, I don't talk to the customers. So who talks to the customers? Oh, nobody's talking to the customers. So again, the conversations come back to no PO. Having strong product ownership within the organization is key to success, whether you are doing it at a team level or at a scaled level, or multiple teams, large programs, or small products. Having strong product owners who have great domain knowledge, who have availability for the teams, and also they have authority. They have authority to say no to things that they think are not providing value to the organization or will not have any value for the customers. They are in touch with the customers. Even if you move, your teams have the greatest processes, engineering practices, and they move from releasing every year to releasing every single day. But what's the benefit when your product owner is not showing that product to the customer and getting early feedback? That's the key. So having a strong product owner and the responsibilities that the product owner should have is a key to scaling. Now also, product owner is responsible to own and manage something called product backlog. Yes. Having a well-groomed, ordered, and appropriately described product backlog is a key for any team to scale or accelerate their value delivery. A lot of times we find that when the teams get together, even if it is either single team or multiple teams, the product backlog is not really sprint ready. What I mean by not sprint ready is there are dependencies which were never discussed. Now the team members pick it up and it's like, whoa, we need that service for us to write this code. And like, okay, who owns that service? Oh, we don't own that service. Somebody else owns it. So when will they do it? Oh, we don't know. We'll have to talk to them. Can they do it now? They'll say, oh, it depends. You know, they have other things that they are working on. Yes, please.
When you talk of product ownership, you're talking about end-to-end, right?
Help me understand what you mean by end-to-end.
And not components of the software.
I mean,
For example, if this was a internet-based application,
Sure.
A web-based application that's got a front end, a back office, a server component to it, and several components that requires multi-skills to get it. The product ownership that you're talking about is really the end-to-end portion of it, right? Because often, I don't want to jump the gun.
Please,
It's
no,
on this
go
line,
ahead.
but often there could be a tendency to talk about ownership at a component level. So in what context are you talking about?
So ideally, you shouldn't even have component level ownership of product.
So you're talking end-to-end.
Yes. If somebody else owns a middle layer and somebody else owns your backend, that's like an organizational dysfunction that you can trace back to how the organization is structured.
Right.
Okay? All right. So we were talking about the product backlog. Having a great product backlog, which is ready, sprint ready, is ordered all the time. Also, one thing that a lot of teams face is they go to the sprint and there's a number of items in the backlog and like, okay, which ones we pick? Which ones are higher priority? The answer is all of them. We want all of them, right? So doesn't matter. All of these are higher priority. So the conversation is not about which ones are priority, but in what order do we pick them? When the product owner says that all of these are priority, it tells us that they haven't gone through that exercise where they have identified that which item is most valuable to me today. And that's an exercise your Scrum Master could help facilitate or coach the product owner to go through before the sprint begins. In fact, sprint planning begins, so that the product owner comes to the sprint planning with a product backlog which is ordered. So there is an explicit understanding among everybody, shared understanding that item on the top is the first thing that we got to pick. So there has to be no conversation about which one would we pick now, unless team finds that first one is something that we can't do now. But how about we start with the second one? Yes.
So you're saying that if the product owner says that all are priority, that means he has not done the work.
Looks like it could be the case.
Okay. So we should challenge him.
Well, that's instead of you challenging them during the sprint planning, that's a Scrum Master who should make this as a point to work with the product owner before the sprint planning when they are refining the product backlog continuously. So if you go through the Scrum guide, Scrum Master has 3 core responsibilities. One is towards the team, which most of you are familiar with, but the Scrum Master also has responsibility towards the product owner and the organization, which in many times we find is missing because the Scrum Master has either multiple teams that they are working on, or they are also being asked to write code or do other things. And so their focus only remains working with the team, but not these parts. So coming to that point, if product owner is not doing that, that would be Scrum Master who could facilitate that.
So what I want to ask is, suppose the product owner says all are priority, and it's easy to say, or rather, it's difficult to prioritize compared to put the order in which the development team has to pick up, right? So if he says that all are priority and you just ask him to choose, so you'll just put a number saying that, okay, these are in the order of pickup.
I wouldn't say it's difficult to prioritize. I would say they haven't gone through that exercise of identifying what's really valuable for me to do. Yes?
If you could repeat the question what they are asking.
Sure, yes, thank you.
Supposed to understand what context you are.
So the question is, if the product owner comes to the sprint planning and they says, all of these are priority for me, right? What is the interpretation for that? So it's not because it's hard, but it's because they haven't probably gone through that exercise of evaluating the value. What's the business value for us of doing that thing? Yes.
I think sometimes it's driven by fear as well. I think often we don't necessarily appreciate where our product owners have come from, and in previous guises, the failure of our technology teams to actually deliver within the time that they had wanted to deliver, particularly switching from waterfall to agile. And sometimes your product owners have been let down, and the things they were happy to put out previously were never actually delivered. So you're fighting with that mentality as well. So hence they're reluctant to actually put the priority on those items because they think it'll never come back around. Not understanding the model they're now switching into, which means, yeah, sure, we wanted to prioritize so we can focus on the hard things first. That doesn't mean to say you're not going to get the lower items. Those will come up.
Sure.
But in a release, if they stay important, in a release further down the line. So I think you're struggling with that one as well.
Sure. Great point. Thanks for sharing. So her point is it could be the product owner's old traditional mindset where if they say this is priority, the things that they called as lower priority may not even get implemented. So that could be the fear in the mind of the product owner. Yes, please.
I have seen something different about priority when it comes to the features. Mostly the POs are pretty much aligned with the priority. This is what I need, this is what I don't need. Maybe I need it later. But when it comes to technical debt or the defects, they say fix it all. That's where they don't most happen to the priority. Have you experienced with this something?
Yes. So the question is, do you guys have a mic? So the question is, when there is a defects in the product backlog, usually the product owner is not willing to take responsibility of ordering them. And then they would say, well, that's your thing, go ahead and fix all of those, right? So give you an real life example from my work. I was on a large program where I think 2008 or 9, there were teams working on code, teams testing, and all those. So these, obviously dysfunctional, this testing team would have a daily phone call with the product owner to go over the number of defects that they found, to A, identify which were the valid defects, B, which one would be higher priority for a team to pick it up now. So to your point, that's an organizational dysfunction. Why is the team having defects, which they have to go through obviously later? If the teams are working in silos, then yes, it will happen. But if your dev and the test and all those team members are working together, fixing the defects when they find it within the sprint.
Yes, I mean, we do that. We have kind of a zero defect policy. If you are developing a story or something and you identify a defect on that, so we don't close it until all the defects, doesn't matter which severity it is, 1 to 4 maybe, but until we fix all the defects, we don't close the story. But sometimes we have defects from the previous work, right? We have legacy code, so the products are there since 20-30 years. We deals in mainframe,
Sure.
so we keep getting those defects.
So product owner could, in that case, work with, so his question is, if there are defects from the legacy code which has existed for 20-30 years, how do we handle those? So your product owner, when they work with the team to refine the product backlog, this is a conversation that should happen at that time. That, okay, we have some defects, and obviously they are not from right now, but obviously from maybe 10 years ago, code that was written, but we found now, what do we do about it? So then you put that in a backlog and work with the team to identify that how severe it is, whether we should handle it now or can it wait. If it has waited for 10 years, can it wait for 2 more sprints? That could be the conversation.
That's really logical. I mean, that makes sense. And everybody knows it. But I was telling some behavior, sometimes we see the product owners that they don't want to step in prioritizing the defects. They're more interested in the features, especially the stories.
So that brings us back to the strong product ownership. If they do not want to own the backlog, that's a dysfunction in there.
I have a question.
Okay, I'll come to you.
Yeah. The subject
Wait,
is...
please.
The subject of this topic, the topic is actually, is your organization ready for scaling agile?
Please wait.
but we are still talking about the basics. I'm a bit worried.
You have got time limits, right? So
Yes.
we are getting a little bit time.
It's already half an hour, more than half an hour.
So you have 4 more minutes to write down some factors for leadership agility and the product ownership.
Learning that we can fulfill, where he talked about, moving from 2.5 minutes on products. Okay, right.
You have 30 more seconds. Twelve, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Well, they're kind of there. I think we can do better than this. The next factor that influences your ability to scale is the practices that you follow. Now, some of you might be in software using Scrum, XP practices. Some of you might be using Kanban, or any other practices, processes, frameworks that you follow. How good are you with those? We stopped doing Scrum because we find Kanban more easier, or because we were not able to do it properly. We were not able to complete the sprint with what we planned and deliver that. Or did our delivery was not really potentially shippable because we didn't do the performance testing and the security testing and the integration and all those things. So evaluate within your context, with your teams, that how good have we adapted the process that we have chosen to. If it is engineering practice, are you doing continuous integration correctly? Are you able to deploy frequently, get feedback early? Are you doing pair programming? Now, if you are doing scale, if you want to scale from 7 people to 700 or even 17, it's critical that the code that is being written is really a quality code. How many of you think that the code that your teams write is a great quality code, goes to next level without any defects? The developers are doing the automated unit testing, and they are identifying defects early, fixing those, doing refactoring time to time. Yes, some kind of yes and no. Yes, so these are critical practices. If you are scaling, you are working with a lot of other issues like code merges, integration testing, system testing, and all the ability kind of things that your product must satisfy. And if these things are not automated, there are good chances that your scaling effort may not be effective. You will only find frustration when you see 5 teams throwing buggy code at the end of the iteration. Let us keep going here. Last factor is the quality. So if there are defects that you are finding after the sprint is over, or towards the last days of the sprint, where there are silos within the team, or the quality is an afterthought, you are actually getting the testing team members on the team only when certain things have already happened on the project or a product increment, that could be a sign of the dysfunction. The quality is not an afterthought, but has to be brought in when your product is being planned or it is being designed at architectural level or at the early stages. When the product owner is thinking about a product, writing the description or acceptance criteria, your testing team members are part of that discussion. The testing team members are not given a list of requirements which they would read and then test the code. So see how good your teams are with the thought process of quality. So again, let's take 5 minutes and discuss what factors apply to your conversations within your teams about the practices, processes that you follow, automation, what level of automation you have already accomplished, how far you are there, and the quality. You have 5 minutes to do that. And after this, we may have your team come up and share what are your findings with the rest of the groups here. So I want to quickly wrap it up.
Where you may not lasers and
areas that are relevant to your teams. How about we identify that now what you do with these? So an easy way I have found for teams to have this conversation is through a metaphor of the transformation that a caterpillar goes through. How many of you don't know this transformation? Can I see hands if you don't know about this transformation? Okay, I'll be happy to explain. So when the butterfly lays eggs, the egg turns into a caterpillar. So it's already a living being, and I'm sure your organization at least do something right today. So I have omitted the egg part. Yeah. So what I would do is, if I think that automating the testing is critical for us to scale, if that's my team's understanding, we discuss that how would we rate ourselves on this transformation that a caterpillar goes through. Are we at an infant stage here, growing obviously, or are we into this chrysalis state where the caterpillar is ready to transform into a butterfly? And the next stage is obviously it's about to shed its chrysalis state and become a butterfly that has wet wings and is not already flying, but it's kind of getting ready there. And then you have a stage where there is an adult butterfly that flies, and people like it. If you've been to Diana's session yesterday in the Agile Fluency model, you have different levels which we identified through stars, that how many stars your organization has based on certain criteria. So here, this different metaphor. Sure, this is not a maturity model. This is not a maturity model. This is also not an evaluation criteria or a checklist. I'm giving it to you. What I'm trying to do here is help you initiate conversations within your teams. That what is important for us if we want to scale. And what you need to do is have these conversations within your teams. So this was like a mock dry run for you guys, identifying certain factors and having conversations that within that factor, what is important for us. And you would do same with your teams. Identify what is critical for the team. You would not be creating an Excel spreadsheet based on what you discussed today and saying, okay, let's put a check mark against each item that we do it or not. this helps you to initiate that conversation. And once you have those factors that you think that these are critical for us, you evaluate yourself. How are we doing on these factors? Are we already flying, or are we yet to transform ourselves? We need more of that. And that helps you bring next discussion in the context as, okay, what we want to do about it. Yes? I guess some of the participants were expecting that I would talk about the SAFE framework. I would put a big picture here and explain how would you scale Agile, but that's not the point for this conversation. Hope all of you are on the same page, those who are in the room. All right, so what I would encourage you to make it your own. Identify, I showed 6 factors which I found useful. Identify what factors you find is useful for you. Maybe these, or maybe some different. Add some more or remove some if you think that these are not important for you. Create that environment for you to have that conversation, identify those factors, and then take it from there. Also, if you had a conversation with one team or one division, doesn't mean that that same conversation applies to your other division within the same organization as well, because their context changes. Jeff Sutherland says, context is something that you need to look out for. Scaling process is not something that you should be looking for. With that, thank you. I'm open for questions. Yes?
You said the 6 factors are from your view. But what I was wondering is you haven't spoken about the Scrum Master role here, which is key for scale.
Sure.
Yeah. So why did you not bring up? So you spoke about product owner, but you didn't talk about the role of Scrum Master, which is key.
Scrum Master is a critical role for teams following Scrum. Agree? Not every team is following Scrum. Teams who are primarily in software, they are either Scrum or Kanban, but you could have teams which have no relation with the Scrum Master role. Like you have all DBAs in a team. What do you want to do about it? So what I have covered is the process area. What are your practices that you need to look out for? If you are the Scrum shop or the Scrum team and the practice obviously calls out for the Scrum Master, then you would discuss about the Scrum Master role in there. But if you're doing Kanban, you don't have any Scrum Master, that's okay. You identify within Kanban what is useful for you. Then your conversation changes to cycle time and how frequently we are able to deploy. Yes?
So the last question.
Yes. Please speak louder. We have a mic? Yeah. Okay, here.
So we spoke about automation.
Yes.
Right. There are a number of cases where one, automation is more expensive than manual testing in many cases.
Sure.
So organization deliberates whether to invest in automation or go with manual. Second is the reusability of automation. We spoke about automation during development. So when I automate as part of my development cycle, so when will I reuse it? So after I automate it, I run it once, then that gets scrapped because in the following sprint I do further enhancements, develop new user stories, so the automated scripts are no longer valid. So I keep automating, I run once, and I just throw it and again automate. So when we talk about automation, so should we not also look at return on investment?
Sure, and I can give you an example from Google. I was recently talking with someone, and the Google's code, overall code, changes every month by 33%. And there are multiple deployments in production that happen every day, and each of the deployment goes through millions of tests. So it depends on your need or the product that you're working on. If you are developing like a mobile iPhone game that has like 5 levels, does it make sense to automate your testing? May not be, as you're saying, right? It may not give you the return on investment. But if you have a product, like you have a mature like a travel site or a banking website or any of that kind of insurance applications, if your product is going to exist or has existed for long and is going to exist, most of the organizations I work with have found value in automating. In fact, a lot of organizations stop funding an initiative that is spending money on manual testing. They would not fund that initiative. Yes, any other questions?
Contracts. So customer contracts are something that impact scalability within the team, which is a big factor because your team might want to scale, but the customer contract prevents.
So that you can relate back to the culture of the organization and the structure of the organization, that how is your organization serving the customers. Today's organizations, in the newer way of work, organizations are collaborating with the customer to the level that they have customer with them and they are co-creating the product. They are not getting some written documents from them and then based on that they develop the product and send back, but they are working with the customer hand in hand to identify what hypothesis is correct. They are learning from their hypothesis and incrementally developing the product. So in that case, if you were again thinking back, saying, okay, would I be doing a fixed contract or a time and material contract? See how would that conversation change when your customer is with you, they don't have the requirements up front, and you guys are working together on quickly iterating.
So what you're saying is gets factored into the first two factors.
Yes. But if the organizational culture is to, a top-down approach where certain people from, marketing or leadership, they go and commit to the client and say, oh, well, this is what our team is going to deliver, and pick up the contract, sign some, numbers on it, and say, now, okay, go figure out, do it. That's how the culture in the organization works. And that's not conducive to what we are talking here. Yes, any last question? No? If not, thank you for your time, and I appreciate it. Thank you.